When most people think of autism, they think it is all about social and communication challenges. Now, it is true that these challenges are common to all autistic people by definition. But what if I was to tell you that for many autistic people, there are other challenges that outweigh the impacts of these more obvious traits? In particular, I am referring to the sensory challenges that autistic people face. Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic adult, and it's my goal to spread positive information and advocate for older autistic adults like me. In this podcast, I want to dive deep into the autistic experience of our senses. One of the most significant aspects of being autistic is our sensory experience of the world around us. This is typically different to how the neurotypical world experience their senses, so let's have a look at what the difference looks like and how it might be different even between autistic people. In my opening statement, I suggested that some autistic people struggle with sensory challenges more than social ones. While this is true, and indeed it is my personal experience, I need to make a couple of qualifications to this statement. All autistic people experience both social communication and what's called restricted repetitive behaviours, interests or activities. These restricted repetitive behaviours also typically include hypo or hyperreactivity to sensory stimuli. So while in theory it is possible for an autistic person to have restricted repetitive behaviours without sensory challenges, that scenario seems to be extremely uncommon. So most, if not all autistic people will experience these sensory differences. All autistic people have unique experiences, and as a part of that, how challenging each of these areas is will be different in each of us. So let's start off with a quick exploration of the body's sensory systems. So everyone knows that the body has 5 senses, right? Wrong. The body actually has 8 physical sensory systems. Let's go through them. Touch, taste, smell, seeing, and hearing. Okay, no surprises there, but let's go a bit deeper. At number 6, we have the vestibular system, which takes care of balance and movement. Number 7 is proprioception, which locates our body in the space around us. And finally, at number 8, we have interoception, which accounts for all of our internal sensations. Now, you might think I'm just getting theoretical for the sake of using some big words, and these things don't really affect us in our day-to-day lives. But this is where it gets interesting for autistic people in particular. It's true that for most neurotypical people, these extra 3 sensory systems do their job without much of a need for us to think about the fact that they even exist. But for autistic people, nothing could be further from the truth. And we'll return to this a bit later. Now, as we have mentioned, one of the first things to note when it comes to how autistic people experience the world around us differently is that we have a generally heightened experience of our senses. This can lead to several outcomes. We might find sensory experiences overwhelming, uncomfortable, disorienting, or even painful. We may have senses that are so much more refined than the people around us that in some cases we may be able to detect things that other people are unaware of, and even use these hypersensitivities to create value in our careers or in our personal lives. Or conversely, we may seek sensory experiences that others might find unusual or extreme. And in contrast to this, we may also be undersensitive in certain areas or be unaware of external inputs or miss sensory cues altogether that other people take for granted. Okay, so let's run through all 8 sensory systems and have a bit of a look at what the autistic experience might be for each of them. I will focus mainly on my experiences, but try to give other examples also common to autistic people. Firstly, let's take a look at hearing, or our auditory system. Many autistic people experience sensitivities in how we hear sounds. Typically, this can look like being easily startled by or even fearful of loud noises. Some examples here might include loud motorcycles or cars, barking dogs, thunder. For me, my phone alert is quite loud and in a quiet environment can even trigger physical tics. Some autistic people may even find loud noises physically painful. Moving away from loud noises, autistic people may also have the ability to hear soft sounds or even sounds that other people can't hear at all. Some examples here might include the buzzing of fluorescent lighting, the hum of the power in the walls. Some autistic people can even hear their own heart beating, and I've experienced this a few times lying in bed in a quiet room. Background noise is something that many autistic people struggle with. This can be for a few reasons. Because our autistic hearing is typically very sensitive, background noise can very quickly become overwhelming. Added to this is the fact that many autistic people find they hear and decode everything at the same intensity. For example, in a restaurant, the person talking right next to us might be processed by our brain at the same intensity as the person talking at the far end of the room, along with the sounds from the kitchen and the traffic outside. And the banging of cutlery on top of that is like a knife through the skull. This is why many autistic people wear noise-cancelling headphones, ear defenders or earplugs in public. These accommodations really help, whether it's at the supermarket, on public transport, in the office or even out walking. Our next sense is seeing, or our visual system. The most common experience for autistic people is struggling with bright lights. This might extend to an aversion to overhead lighting or downlights. Never turn on the big light without warning is a common neurodivergent saying. So lamps or side lighting may be more comfortable for many autistic people. Bright sunlight is also a big one, and always having sunglasses on hand is a must. Flashing lights, like party lights or nightclubs, might also cause some autistic people discomfort. I'm also extra sensitive to the colour temperature of lighting. If I'm in a room lit by very white light, I find it uncomfortable. I know other autistic people have the reverse experience, needing the same very white light that I hate. Likewise, some autists prefer dim room lighting and others prefer well-lit spaces. Some autistic people might be overwhelmed by visual patterns like stripy fabric or wallpaper. For me, I've always been able to see in very low-lit situations and have been able to see in near darkness where the people around me have not been able to see. And I know of one person who can easily read the microscopic print of the miniature Bible in a doll's house. Moving on, we come to touch, or our tactile system. Common autistic experiences include an aversion to certain types of fabrics, like microfiber cloths, etc. Many autistic people find light touch almost distressing. That may be from someone lightly touching our arm, a person lightly brushing past in public, or even how clothes feel against the skin. I can think of many examples here, but one that stands out is when watching TV on the couch with Trish. If we're sitting in such a way that she is just ever so lightly touching me, I find that uncomfortable. If, on the other hand, the touch is firm or has some pressure, then it's fine. Now, going back to clothes in general, this can be a big one for autistic people. For many autistic people, how clothes feel outweigh what they look like. So it may be important not to judge the fashion sense of the autistic person, as they might be compromising look for feel, and that may just be the difference in being able to get through the day. For me, when I feel clothes or indeed underwear that suits my tactile autistic sensitivities, I might buy several of that same piece of clothing, because as seasons and fashions change, our safe clothing choices disappear from the shops, never to return. Another clothing sensitivity that seems common to some autistic people in particular is pants, and how they feel against our legs. For some, this might mean wearing shorts or skirts all year round to keep our legs free. For me, I find that by the time evening comes, my legs need to be free, so I ditch the pants altogether and often just wear underwear, or better still, compression tights around the house. This not wearing pants around the house also seems to be quite common for many autistic people. And on clothes in general, I think I would ditch them altogether if it was socially acceptable to do so. And I've heard this thought echoed as well through the autistic community. No judgment. There's nothing better than finding a deserted beach and having a skinny dip without the horrid feeling of wet cloth against the skin. Okay, next we move on to our taste, or gustatory system. This one is huge for so many autistic people, and often can result in highly restricted diets and eating patterns. This is because we may find our tastes or certain textures in foods overwhelming. In some cases, this may result in a secondary diagnosis of avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or ARFID, which is a recognised eating disorder. I will return to ARFID in more detail in a future podcast. Restricted intake of food can lead to health implications from the lack of essential vitamins and nutrients. This restricted eating has been a constant through my life, having a reputation as a fussy eater as a child, but then not growing out of that as an adult. Now I understand my autism, that finally makes complete sense. Some of my friends used to joke that my favourite food was plain. Yep, yummy. The last of the 5 well-known senses is smell, or the olfactory system. Again, autistic people will commonly have very sensitive noses and become overwhelmed quickly with strong or unpleasant smells. For me, food smells is one of the key ones. In fact, in a former job, my desk was close to the workplace kitchen, and frequently I had to leave my desk and sometimes even the office building entirely if someone cooked strong food in the microwave oven. But equally, it might be odours that other people barely even register that can cause us distress. Examples of this might include perfumed soaps and shampoos, personal deodorants and room deodorants, other people's body odour or breath smells, even if very subtle, and the smell of furnishings or even the smell of freshly washed clothes. Faint gas or smoke smells might also be picked up by the autistic person before anyone else notices. Okay, so now we start to move into lesser known sensory territory. And first up here we have at sensory system number 6, the vestibular system, which is responsible for our balance and movement. Autistic hypersensitivity in the vestibular system might include things like getting motion sick easily. As a child, I often got car sick on family holidays and had to sit in the front seat so I could see out of the front window to mitigate this. For some autistic people, vestibular challenges can manifest in issues with coordination and balance. This may also result in difficulties with spatial awareness and navigation. This might mean the autistic person gets lost easily. Now, a point to make here ties this navigation challenge to the fact that autistic people may need to escape situations that are sensorily or emotionally overwhelming. This is called eloping. And eloping in unfamiliar environments may cause the autistic person to get lost. Sadly, we've seen this many times in the news where an autistic child may get lost in unfamiliar environments like bushland and be unable to find their way back. Even just last week here in Australia, an autistic child went missing, probably due to this combination of elopement and getting lost, and has not yet been found. But it's not just autistic children that may encounter these situations. Autistic older people may be at risk of this also, possibly eloping from the family home, retirement village or nursing home. Spatial awareness issues from vestibular differences also tie in closely with our next sense, proprioception. Proprioception is the sense of where our body is in relation to the space around us. It helps us identify where our limbs are and in what direction we need to move them and with how much force in response to our environment. The common differences autistic people may experience is being a bit clumsy, like walking into the corners of tables or door frames, maybe lacking precise hand coordination when doing intricate work, or even having difficulties catching a ball. In more extreme cases, this might be diagnosed as dyspraxia or developmental coordination delay, DCD. And this diagnosis is also common in autistic people. To dive deeper into this, check out my podcast on dyspraxia in autism. Other proprioceptive differences might include feeling like our bodies are expanding or feeling like there is no boundary between our bodies and the space around us. This is where weighted blankets or tight hugs might help, as firm pressure can redefine that boundary. I know of some autistic people who occasionally ask family members to sit or lie on them to alleviate this feeling. For others, having a sleeping space against the wall or in a nook might also help in being able to exist in a more defined space while resting. Lastly, at number 8, we have the sensory system of interoception. Interoception is the body's awareness of what's going on inside. Hunger, thirst, pain, emotional awareness and regulation, fatigue, internal temperature, awareness of heartbeat or breathing, fear, nausea or mood. Again, autistic people can either be hyper or hypo-aware of any of these things. Examples of this might include not registering hunger or thirst until extremely hungry, thirsty or even dehydrated. Not recognising the need to go to the toilet until it's almost too late. In children, this might look like a child who frequently wets the bed, either being hypersensitive or hyposensitive to pain. As a child, I cut my finger to the bone, and instead of yelling in pain, I stood there manipulating the cut so I could look at my bone and muscle. Being unaware of our emotions or unable to describe them to others. This is called alexithymia, and for a deep dive on that topic, feel free to watch my podcast on that also. Alexithymia may also mean we experience physical consequences of our emotions without really understanding the root emotional cause. Okay, that covers the 8 sensory systems, but there is some suggestion there is in fact a 9th system, and that is spiritual sensitivity. I'm not going to dive into that one here, but if you are interested in exploring spiritual sensitivity further, please refer to my podcast on autism, ghosts and the supernatural, and also my podcast on autism and religion. In those podcasts, I look at this autistic spiritual sensitivity from both a supernatural lens and the perspective of autistic religious spirituality. A key aspect of the sensory system for many autistic people is that we're not just overwhelmed in negative ways, but may indeed seek sensory input as a way of self-regulating. Examples of this might include listening to our favourite songs on repeat, and while we may find loud noises or other people's music a challenge to our senses, paradoxically we may choose to listen to our own music loudly. Many autistic people like to spin, rock, swing or sway as a vestibular sensory input. Another vestibular input might be seeking out heights or climbing. We have mentioned pressure and weighted blankets as proprioceptive sensory seeking, but for me, being submerged in or swimming underwater can have this same effect. Having the equal pressure of the water on all sides can be soothing and a way of feeling the boundary between our body and the rest of the world. Another sensory seeking activity that I find useful is hot baths or showers. This not only helps with proprioception, but the warmth also helps with my interoception in giving a soothing temperature experience. But also I find this to be one of the most effective ways to reset my emotional system when dysregulated. Common tactile sensory seeking items might include soft fake fur blankets, soft toys or plushies. Squishable stim toys might also be useful here. While many autistic people find food and tastes overwhelming, others might actually be hyposensitive and seek spicy foods or other foods with strong taste. So we have touched on how autistic people have a heightened sensory experience. But what happens when autistic people experience sensory overwhelm? Well, the answer to this question depends on how much overwhelm and for how long. For brief instances of sensory overload, you might see the autistic person using reflexive protective responses, such as clamping our hands over our ears in response to a loud noise, like a dog barking or a loud motorbike, vacuum cleaner, etc. Tightly closing our eyes or even pressing the butts of our palms against our eye sockets as a result of bright lights or sunlight. Maybe gagging when eating something that is beyond what our taste buds can tolerate. Maybe needing to remove clothing as a response to uncomfortable fabrics or even the feeling of constriction being wrapped in fabric. Escaping environments with overwhelming smells like restaurants. Getting car sick easily in response to motion. Needing to wrap our arms tightly around ourselves to redefine the space around our bodies. This list could go on, but as you can see, there are many instinctive and reactive responses that autistic people might make. But what happens when the autistic person can't escape the smells or can't remove the uncomfortable clothing or is forced to remain in a noisy or overlit environment? In these situations, the overwhelm will compound, especially if there are multiple sensory stimuli acting concurrently, and particularly if the exposure is prolonged. The autistic body will justifiably tip into a fight, flight, or freeze response. Fight, flight, freeze is the natural world's response to danger, and in these situations, the body of the autistic person is automatically responding to this perceived danger to our senses. In other words, the autistic person is likely to either have a meltdown, a shutdown, or they might escape or disappear from the situation. All of these responses are justifiable and proportional in these moments. So if you're autistic and you feel yourself sliding into overwhelm, you are justified in getting the hell out of there. And if you are the friend, family member, carer or colleague of an autistic person, and you are aware that they are starting to be overwhelmed, it may be helpful to suggest or even guide them out of that situation. Obviously, in guiding any autistic person away from a situation, you need to make sure that you're doing so with their consent. Okay, so this is all very well, but how can you tell if an autistic person is starting to be overwhelmed? The first signs of overwhelm may be signs of what's called dysregulation. This means the autistic person may start to stim more or with large emotions than may be usual. This may look like leg bouncing or repetitive hand movements, but may include whole body movements like rocking or swaying. For me, my head might start to move back and forth in a slow, repetitive, subtle head shaking. Some autistic people may start to make vocal sounds or repeat phrases. Now, all of these things may be incredibly subtle because many autistic people have learned over a lifetime to mask these movements. So don't expect a Hollywood-style obvious performance. But likewise, these movements might subtly go from being unnoticeable to noticeable as dysregulation increases. In fact, as autistic people, we may not even be aware of our own dysregulation until it escalates. So that is what may happen on any given day during sensory overwhelm. But what happens where this overwhelm happens day after day in something like a work or school environment and goes unchecked? This slow accumulation of sensory overwhelm may mean the autistic person manages to make it through the day but has a meltdown when getting home and back into their safe environment. What may happen over a longer period of this continued exposure is autistic burnout. This is when the body shuts down, not for a few hours, but for extended periods. This might be days, weeks, months, or even longer. Burnout might mean extended periods of fatigue, and the autistic person may be unable to do their usual daily activities during recovery. At this point, I want to acknowledge also that some autistic people actually experience their senses in multidimensional ways. By this I mean that for some people a sound may trigger a response like a colour, or a touch may trigger a taste. This multimodal sensory response is called synesthesia and is experienced by approximately 20% of autistic people. There are many more variations than the examples above, so if you'd like to get a deeper understanding of synesthesia, please check out my podcast on synesthesia and autism. So in summary, many, if not all, autistic people will either have strong sensitivities or undersensitivity to any of the physical senses. It's also possible for an autistic person to be both under and oversensitive to different aspects of the same sensory system. Autistic people may also seek sensory experiences as a way of regulating our emotional state, or even just for enjoyment. And importantly, all autistic people will have a different profile from each other in what overwhelms us and what we seek. Okay, so that's my take on the autistic sensory experience. If you are autistic, what's been your sensory experience? Let's chat further in the comment section. And as always, like, subscribe and share for more experiences of an older autistic bloke. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.